Mark Rice's hands trembled as he offered his in marriage to the alien girl who had saved humanity. It was a moment of triumph and terror, born from the ashes of near annihilation aboard the HSS Horizon. 48 hours earlier, the colony ship had been crippled by a Vorta attack. Alarms blared as Mark, a 28-year-old engineer, raced through smoke-filled corridors. The ship's life support systems were failing. Oxygen levels plummeted with each passing minute. As Mark worked to repair critical systems, he stumbled upon an unmarked stasis pod. Inside lay an injured Vorta female, no more than 25 years old. Her silver skin was marred by plasma burns, her breathing shallow. Captain Amanda Chen's orders echoed in Mark's mind: conserve resources at all costs. But as he gazed at the wounded alien, Mark made a choice that would alter the course of human history. He activated the pod's revival sequence. The Vorta's eyes fluttered open, revealing pupils of swirling gold. "I am Janus," she whispered, her voice carrying hints of an alien accent. "You've saved me from my own people." As Mark treated her wounds with precious medical supplies, Janus revealed the truth. She was a political refugee, fleeing persecution on her homeworld. The attack on the Horizon had been meant to recapture her. "I possess information vital to your species' survival," Janus explained, wincing as Mark sealed a gash on her arm. "Vorta military capabilities, future invasion plans, all of it stored here." She tapped her temple. The ship shuddered, a grim reminder of their predicament. Captain Chen burst into the medical bay, her face a mask of fury when she saw Janus. "Rice, what have you done?" Chen demanded. "We're running out of air and you waste resources on an enemy alien?" Mark stood his ground. "She's not the enemy, Captain. She's our best chance at survival." Chen's eyes narrowed. "Explain, now." Mark outlined his plan. Use Janus's expertise on Vorta technology to repair the faster-than-light drive. If successful, they could reach the nearest human outpost before life support failed completely. If not, they'd all perish in the cold vacuum of space. "You have 48 hours, Chen growled, turning on her heel. "After that, I'm spacing the alien to buy us more time." As they raced against the clock, Janus worked alongside Mark, her delicate fingers manipulating unfamiliar human tools. In quiet moments between repairs, she spoke of Vorta customs. "My people have a tradition," Janus said, her golden eyes meeting Mark's. "We repay life debts through marriage. You saved me, Mark Rice. I offer you my hand." Mark's heart raced, but he pushed the offer aside. There wasn't time for such complications. Not when survival hung by a thread. Unknown to the humans aboard the Horizon, a Vorta warship had detected their distress signal. At its helm stood High Admiral Kroll, his face twisted with rage and determination. He would reclaim his daughter, no matter the cost. As Mark and Janus toiled to repair the ship, the clock ticked down. They had mere hours to salvage the drive, protect Janus, and deliver her invaluable intelligence to human authorities, all while navigating the minefield of interspecies attraction and the suspicion of Mark's fellow crew members. The fate of two species now rested in their hands. The acrid smell of burning circuits filled the air as Mark and Janus worked feverishly on the Horizon's faster-than-light drive. Sparks flew from exposed panels, illuminating the dim engineering bay in brief flashes. Mark wiped sweat from his brow, his fingers trembling slightly as he manipulated delicate components. "Hand me the phase coupler," he said, his voice hoarse from the smoke-filled air. Janus passed him the tool, her silver skin gleaming in the emergency lighting. "This configuration should bypass the damaged power relays," she explained, her golden eyes fixed on the intricate machinery. As they worked, the ship's intercom crackled to life. "All senior staff report to the bridge immediately," Captain Chen's voice rang out, tension evident in her tone. Mark exchanged a worried glance with Janus. "I have to go. Will you be okay here?" Janus nodded, her alien features set in drive. "I'll continue the repairs. We're close to a breakthrough. I can feel it." As Mark made his way to the bridge, he couldn't help but notice the hostile stares from passing crew members. Whispers followed in his wake, a mix of fear and suspicion. He quickened his pace, eager to escape the oppressive atmosphere. The bridge was a hive of activity when Mark arrived. Captain Chen stood at the center, her face grim as she addressed the assembled staff. Security Chief Lucas Blackwood loomed nearby, his scarred face twisted in a scowl. "Our long-range sensors have detected an incoming Vorta warship," Chen announced, her words sending a ripple of fear through the room. "It's been identified as the VCS Nemesis, commanded by High Admiral Kroll." Mark's stomach dropped. He glanced at the main view screen, where a menacing silhouette grew steadily larger against the backdrop of stars. "Captain, we can't trust that alien," Blackwood growled, stepping forward. "For all we know, she's been leading them right to us." Chen held up a hand, silencing him. "Our oxygen levels are critically low. We have less than 36 hours before complete system failure. The drive repairs are progressing, but not fast enough. We have two options: surrender to the Vorta or prepare for a battle we're not equipped to win." The room erupted in heated debate. Mark's mind raced, calculating possibilities. Suddenly, an idea struck him. "Captain," he interjected, raising his voice above the din, "what if we use the ship's electromagnetic pulse generator? We could disable the Vorta ship's systems when it gets close enough." Chen's eyes narrowed. "That's a significant risk, Rice. If it fails, we'll be defenseless and without power for life support." As the argument intensified, Mark felt a light touch on his arm. Janus had entered the bridge unnoticed, her alien presence immediately drawing wary glances. "I need to speak with you," she whispered urgently, "in private." Mark followed her to a quiet corner of the bridge, acutely aware of Blackwood's suspicious gaze tracking their movement. Janus leaned close, her breath warm against Mark's ear. "My father's ship has a fatal flaw in its shielding system. A targeted EMP could destroy it entirely." Mark's eyes widened. "You're willing to help us against your own father?" Janus nodded solemnly. "But I need your guarantee of protection and acceptance of my marriage proposal." Before Mark could respond, a rough hand grabbed his shoulder, spinning him around. Blackwood loomed over them, his face contorted with rage. "What are you two whispering about?" he snarled. "I knew we couldn't trust you, alien." Mark stepped between them. "Back off, Blackwood. She's trying to help us." Blackwood's fist connected with Mark's jaw, sending him staggering. As Mark regained his footing, he saw Blackwood reaching for Janus. Without thinking, Mark tackled the security chief. They crashed to the floor, grappling fiercely as shocked crew members looked on. "Enough!" Captain Chen's voice cut through the chaos. She strode over, her authority radiating like a physical force. "Blackwood, stand down, now!" The security chief reluctantly disengaged, his chest heaving with scarcely controlled fury. Chen turned to Janus, her expression a mix of wariness and desperation. "You said you have information that could help us?" Janus nodded, her composure unshaken despite the altercation. "I can provide the specifications to exploit a weakness in the Nemesis's shields, but I require assurances of my safety." Chen's gaze flicked between Janus and Mark, assessing the situation. After a moment of tense silence, she spoke. "Rice, you'll be personally responsible for her. Blackwood, assign 2 guards to monitor them at all times." As Blackwood grudgingly complied, Mark felt the weight of his decision bearing down on him. He looked at Janus, seeing both potential salvation and unknown danger in her alien features. The fate of the Horizon and its crew now rested on his choice, to trust Janus fully or to face almost certain defeat at the hands of the Vorta. Time was running out. The Nemesis grew larger on the interface, a looming harbinger of destruction. Oxygen levels continued to drop, each breath becoming more precious than the last. And in the midst of it all, Mark found himself at the center of a storm that would determine the future of human-Vorta relations. As alarms blared and crew members rushed to battle stations, Mark made his decision. He turned to Janus, his voice low but firm. "Tell us everything you know. We'll protect you." Janus's golden eyes met his, a flicker of relief passing through them. She began to speak, revealing the secrets that could save them all, or doom them to a cold death in the unforgiving void of space. Mark's heart raced as he turned to face Janus, her golden eyes searching his face. The weight of the moment pressed down on him, the fate of the Horizon and its crew hanging in the balance. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. Janus, he said, his voice low but firm, I accept your proposal, both of them. A flicker of relief passed across Janus's alien features. She reached out, her silver fingers intertwining with Mark's. Thank you, she whispered. I swear you won't regret this. Captain Chen's voice cut through the moment. Rice, are you certain about this? The consequences? I understand the risk, Captain, Mark interrupted, turning to face her. But this is our best chance. Janus has the information we need to survive. Chen's eyes narrowed, her gaze flicking between Mark and Janus. After a tense moment, she nodded. Very well. Let's hear what you know, Janus. As Janus began explaining the weakness in the Nemesis's shielding system, Mark noticed the growing tension in the room. Crew members exchanged uneasy glances, some openly glaring at Janus. Security Chief Blackwood stood rigid, his scarred face twisted in scarcely controlled fury. Captain, you can't seriously be considering this, Blackwood growled. It's a trap. She's leading her people right to us. Chen silenced him with a sharp gesture. Enough, Blackwood. We're out of options. Prepare the EMP generator according to Janus's specifications. That's an order. As the engineering team set to work, Mark led Janus to a quiet corner of the bridge. He could feel Blackwood's eyes boring into his back. Tell me more, Mark said softly. Why did you really leave your people? Janus's golden eyes clouded with emotion. My world is changing. For centuries, we've expanded across the stars, conquering and subjugating. But a growing number of us see the futility of this path. We formed a resistance, seeking peace with other species. She paused, her silver skin shimmering in the dim light. My father, High Admiral Kroll, discovered my involvement. He planned to have me executed for treason. I had no choice but to flee. Mark's mind reeled at the implications. So, the attack on the horizon was meant to recapture me, Janus finished. My father will stop at nothing to silence the resistance. But with the information I carry, we might just have a chance at peace. As they worked to modify the EMP generator, Mark found himself drawn deeper into Janus's world. She spoke of Vorta customs, their history, and her hopes for a future where their species could coexist. Despite the dire circumstances, Mark felt a growing connection to this alien woman who had risked everything for her beliefs. On the bridge, Captain Chen watched the Nemesis grow larger on the main view screen. Maintain radio silence, she ordered. We can't risk detection until we're ready. But as the hours ticked by, a series of inexplicable malfunctions began plaguing the horizon. Systems that had just been repaired suddenly failed. Crucial components went offline without warning. What the hell is going on? Chen demanded, frustration etched on her face. Mark and Janus rushed to engineering, only to find chaos. Panels sparked and smoked, and crew members scrambled to contain the damage. This isn't random, Mark realized, examining a fried circuit board. Someone's sabotaging us. Janus's eyes widened in alarm. But who would... Her words were cut off by a ship-wide announcement. All hands, this is Captain Chen. Power up all remaining systems. Prepare for potential hostile engagement. Mark's stomach dropped. We're out of time. They raced back to the bridge, arriving just as a communication channel crackled to life. A deep, imposing voice filled the room. This is High Admiral Kroll of the Vorta warship Nemesis. Surrender immediately and return my daughter, or face annihilation. Captain Chen's face remained impassive as she responded. This is Captain Amanda Chen of the HSS Horizon. We're experiencing technical difficulties and require time to comply with your demands. As Chen stalled for time, Mark and Janus worked frantically to bypass the sabotage systems. The EMP generator hummed to life, its energy building to critical levels. Suddenly, the bridge erupted in chaos. Security Chief Blackwood and a group of armed crew members burst in, weapons raised. This ends now, Blackwood snarled. We're taking control and surrendering to the Vorta. It's our only chance to survive this betrayal. Captain Chen's hand moved towards her sidearm, but Blackwood was faster. Don't try it, Captain. It's over. Mark's finger hovered over the EMP activation switch. He locked eyes with Janus, seeing his own fear and dedication mirrored in her alien gaze. Now, Mark, Janus shouted. He slammed his hand down on the switch. The horizon shuddered as the electromagnetic pulse fired, streaking towards the looming Vorta warship. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. The Nemesis continued its approach, weapons charged and ready to fire. Then, like a dying star, the Vorta ship's shields flickered and failed. The EMP penetrated its hull, cascading through its systems in a wave of destruction. The mighty warship went dark, drifting powerless in the void. A cheer went up from the Horizon's crew, but it was short-lived. Blackwood, his face contorted with rage, turned his weapon on Mark and Janus. "You've doomed us all," he roared. "Seize them!" Mark grabbed Janus's hand and ran, ducking into a nearby corridor as weapons fire erupted behind them. They sprinted through the ship's winding passages, the sound of pursuit echoing off the metal walls. They reached engineering, sealing the doors behind them, but they both knew it was only a temporary reprieve. Outside, they could hear Blackwood and his followers trying to break through. Mark turned to Janus, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "Any ideas?" Janus's golden eyes darted around the room, assessing their options. "We need to reach the captain. If we can restore her command, we might have a chance." The doors shuddered under the impact of a battering ram. Mark knew they were running out of time. He spotted an access panel leading to the ship's maintenance tunnels. "This way," he said, prying open the panel. "We can use the tunnels to reach the bridge." As they crawled into the cramped space, the sound of the engineering doors finally giving way echoed behind them. Mark sealed the access panel, plunging them into darkness, broken only by the dim emergency lighting. They crawled through the claustrophobic tunnels, the sounds of the ship's chaos muffled around them. Mark's mind raced, trying to formulate a plan. They had neutralized the Vorta threat, but now faced an enemy from within. Somehow they needed to regain control of the Horizon, deal with the disabled Nemesis, and find a way to unite the fractured crew. As they neared the access point to the bridge, Mark paused. He turned to Janus, her silver skin glowing faintly in the low light. Despite everything, he felt a surge of affection for this alien woman who had risked everything for a chance at peace. "Whatever happens," he whispered, "we're in this together." Janus nodded, her golden eyes shimmering with emotion. "Together," she echoed. They shared a brief, tender moment before reality intruded once more. The sound of Blackwood's voice, barking orders on the bridge, filtered through the access panel above them. Mark took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. With a nod to Janus, he reached up to open the panel, ready to face whatever chaos awaited them on the other side. Sighed. As Mark pushed open the panel, chaos erupted around them. Blackwood's voice boomed across the bridge. "There they are! Seize them!" Mark and Janus tumbled onto the bridge floor, narrowly avoiding a burst of weapons fire. They scrambled behind a console as Blackwood's supporters advanced. "This way!" Mark shouted, grabbing Janus's hand. They sprinted towards the engineering bay, dodging stun blasts and ducking under grasping arms. They burst through the doors of engineering, their lungs burning. The sound of pursuit grew louder behind them. "We're trapped," Janus panted, her golden eyes wide with fear. Mark's gaze darted around the room, searching for an escape. His eyes landed on a small hatch near the floor. "There!" He yanked open the maintenance shaft entrance and ushered Janus inside. As he squeezed in after her, a stun blast sizzled past his ear. Mark slammed the hatch shut and engaged the manual lock, plunging them into darkness. They crawled through the cramped tunnel, the sound of their pursuers growing fainter. After several minutes of tense silence, Mark activated a small light on his wristcom. "I think we lost them," he whispered. Janus nodded, her silver skin shimmering in the dim light. "But now we're cut off from the rest of the ship." As if in response to her words, Captain Chen's voice crackled over the ship-wide comm system. "Attention, all crew. This is Captain Chen. A ship-wide lockdown is now in effect. Security teams are being deployed to contain the mutiny. Stay in your current locations and await further instructions." Mark cursed under his breath. "We're trapped in here." They continued to crawl through the maintenance shaft, the tight space forcing them into close proximity. Mark could feel the heat radiating from Janus's alien body, smell the faint metallic scent of her skin. After what felt like hours of navigating the labyrinthine passages, they emerged into a larger chamber. Banks of servers and glowing data nodes filled the space. The central computer core, Mark breathed, his eyes widening in realization. Janice moved to a nearby terminal, her fingers flying over the keys. We might be able to access ship systems from here. As they worked to bypass security protocols, Mark found himself marveling at Janice's expertise. Her knowledge of both Vorta and human technology was impressive, and he felt a surge of admiration for her quick thinking. There, Janice said triumphantly, I've restored power to the long-range sensors. Mark leaned in, studying the readouts. His blood ran cold. The Nemesis, it's powering up again. Janice's face paled. My father won't give up easily. He'll board the horizon if he has to. They worked frantically, attempting to undo Blackwood's sabotage and restore the horizon's defenses. As they toiled side by side, Mark found himself hyper-aware of Janice's presence. The way her brow furrowed in concentration, the grace of her movements, the drive in her golden eyes. Why did you really agree to marry me? Mark asked softly, unable to contain his curiosity any longer. Janice paused, her gaze meeting his. At first, it was just part of my escape plan. But now, she hesitated, vulnerability flashing across her alien features. I've never met anyone like you, Mark. Your courage, your kindness, it's shown me that there's hope for peace between our people. Mark's heart raced. He opened his mouth to respond, but a new alert on the terminal interrupted them. Another ship incoming, Janice reported, her eyes widening. It's human. Mark leaned in, studying the readout. The HNS Dauntless. They must have picked up our distress call. Their momentary elation was short-lived as the implications sank in. With Blackwood's mutiny still active, the Nemesis powering up, and now a human warship approaching, they were on the brink of a catastrophic three-way battle. We have to do something, Mark said, his mind racing. If we don't willpower this quickly, a lot of people are going to die. Janice nodded, her expression grim. But how? We're locked out of most systems, and even if we weren't, neither Blackwood nor Captain Chen is likely to listen to us now. Mark's gaze swept over the banks of servers surrounding them. A dangerous idea began to form in his mind. What if we took control of the ship ourselves? Janice's eyes widened. You mean, lock everyone out? Mark, that would be seen as a betrayal by your own people. I know, Mark said softly. But if it prevents a war and saves lives, isn't it worth it? They stared at each other for a long moment, the weight of the decision hanging between them. Finally, Janice nodded. Let's do it. They set to work using Janice's knowledge of Vorta encryption and Mark's familiarity with the Horizon systems to begin the lockout process. As they worked, Mark couldn't help but feel a growing bond with Janice. Her unwavering support and brilliant mind were a comfort in the face of what they were about to do. Suddenly, a series of alarms blared through the computer core. Defensive turrets emerged from hidden panels, their barrels swiveling towards Mark and Janice. Automated defenses, Mark shouted, diving for cover. The system thinks we're intruders. They scrambled behind a server bank as energy blasts scorched the air around them. The computer's emotionless voice echoed through the chamber. Unauthorized access detected. Lethal force authorized. Mark's mind raced, searching for a solution. They were trapped in the heart of the ship, cut off from allies, with both human and Vorta forces converging. And now, the very systems they were trying to control had turned against them. As another volley of energy blasts sizzled past, Mark met Janice's gaze. In her alien eyes, he saw his own willpower reflected. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. Any ideas? Mark asked, a wry smile tugging at his lips despite the dire situation. Janice's expression mirrored his own. A few, but you're not going to like them. As they huddled behind their meager cover, the ship's defenses closing in, Mark knew that the next few moments would determine not just their fate, but the future of human-Vorta relations. With a nod to Janice, he prepared himself for whatever came next. As Mark and Janice huddled behind the server bank, the relentless barrage of energy, blast from the automated defenses, intensified. The air crackled with ozone, and the acrid smell of melted circuitry filled their nostrils. "We need to move," Mark hissed, his eyes darting around the room. "The defenses are adapting to our position." Janice nodded, her silver skin glistening with perspiration. "I have an idea, but it's risky." Before she could elaborate, a surge of electricity arced through the maintenance shaft they had emerged from. The sudden discharge sent sparks flying, illuminating the chamber in a brief, blinding flash. "The ship's fighting back," Mark realized, his heart racing. "We've triggered some kind of automated countermeasure." They scrambled deeper into the maze of servers as another electrical surge coursed through the room. The ship's internal sensors hummed to life, sweeping the area for their heat signatures. Mark's mind raced, weighing their options. The hum of the sensors grew louder, closing in on their position. In that moment, he made a critical decision. "We need to split up," he said, turning to Janice. "I'll stay here and keep trying to override the systems. You're smaller and faster. You might be able to reach the bridge and talk to Captain Chen directly." Janice's golden eyes widened. "That's too dangerous. We should stick together." "We don't have a choice," Mark insisted. "If we both stay here, we'll be caught for sure. This way, we double our chances of success." A moment of understanding passed between them. Janice nodded, her expression a mix of commitment and concern. "Be careful, Mark." "You too," he replied softly. With a final shared glance, Janice slipped away, her lithe form disappearing into a narrow ventilation shaft. Mark watched her go, then turned his attention back to the task at hand. As Mark worked furiously to bypass the ship's security protocols, Janice navigated the claustrophobic confines of the Horizon's ventilation system. Her Vorta physiology, evolved for stealth and agility, served her well as she maneuvered through tight spaces and around sharp corners. Twice she froze as voices drifted up from below, once the gruff tones of Blackwood's mutineers, and later the urgent whispers of Chen's loyalists. Each time, Janice held her breath, her heart pounding so loudly she feared it would give her away. Meanwhile, Mark's situation grew increasingly dire. The ship's defensive systems escalated their assault, deploying reprogrammed maintenance drones to flush him out. The first drone appeared without warning, its red sensor eye gleaming malevolently as it rounded a corner. Mark ducked as the drone fired a searing beam of energy, the heat of it singeing his hair. Frantically, he grabbed a nearby power coupling, yanking it free. As the drone closed in, Mark jammed the live end of the coupling into its chassis. The machine sparked and jerked, its systems overloading before it clattered to the floor. Breathing heavily, Mark surveyed his surroundings. He spotted a toolbox left behind by a maintenance crew and quickly rifled through it, cobbling together makeshift weapons from the spare parts and tools. Outside the Horizon, the situation deteriorated rapidly. High Admiral Kroll, having restored partial power to the Nemesis, launched a series of automated boarding pods. The sleek, predatory machines latched onto the Horizon's hull, their cutting lasers beginning to slice through the outer plating. On the bridge of the approaching HNS Dauntless, Captain Elena Rossi's eyes narrowed as she observed the Vorta attack on her view screen. "Battle stations," she ordered, her voice calm but steely. "Prepare to engage the Nemesis and defend the Horizon." The bridge erupted into a flurry of activity as the crew rushed to comply. The Dauntless surged forward, its weapons systems powering up for the imminent confrontation. Back on the Horizon, Janice finally reached her destination. Peering through a ventilation grate, she observed the tense standoff on the bridge. Captain Chen stood defiantly at the helm, while Blackwood and his remaining mutineers held their positions near the main entrance, weapons drawn. Janice closed her eyes, recalling everything she had learned about human behavior from her time with Mark. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what she was about to do. With a swift kick, Janice dislodged the grate and dropped into the center of the bridge. Both factions whirled to face her, weapons raised. "Wait!" Janice cried, holding up her hands. "You need to listen to me. We're all in terrible danger." She quickly explained the dire situation, the impending Vorta boarding action, and the approach of the Dauntless. As she spoke, the ship shuddered, the first of the Vorta boarding pods beginning to breach the hull. "We don't have time for this infighting," Janice pleaded. "If we don't work together, we'll all die here." Captain Chen and Blackwood exchanged glances, the gravity of the situation sinking in. After a tense moment, Chen nodded. She's right. We need to put aside our differences, at least for now. As if to punctuate her words, alarms blared throughout the ship. Mark's voice came over the comms, breathless but triumphant. Captain, I've managed to bypass the security lockout. I'm sending you the locations of the Vorta boarding pods now. The bridge erupted into action. Captain Chen began issuing rapid-fire orders, coordinating with security teams to repel the Vorta invaders. Blackwood, setting aside his mutinous ambitions, took charge of organizing the ship's defense. Throughout the horizon, humans who had been at each other's throats mere minutes ago now found themselves fighting side by side against a common enemy. Security teams took up defensive positions, while engineers worked feverishly to reinforce hull integrity around the breach points. The first Vorta shock troops burst through the weakened hull sections, their advanced weaponry giving them an immediate advantage. The human defenders, though outgunned, used their intimate knowledge of the ship to set up ambushes and choke points, slowing the Vorta advance. Outside, space lit up with weapons fire as the Dauntless engaged the Nemesis. The two warships traded salvos, their shields flaring under the onslaught. In the midst of the chaos, Mark made a critical discovery. Analyzing the control signals of the Vorta boarding pods, he identified a vulnerability that could force them to detach. However, exploiting this weakness would require him to leave the relative safety of the maintenance shaft and make his way to the ship's outer hull. As Mark contemplated this dangerous but potentially game-changing move, Janice found herself caught in the crossfire on the bridge. A stray shot from a Vorta weapon sizzled past her head, leaving a scorch mark on the wall behind her. For a moment she froze, her instincts torn between her growing loyalty to the humans and her ingrained response to her own kind. The choice that lay before them, Mark's perilous mission to the outer hull and Janice's internal conflict, would shape not only their own fates, but potentially the course of the entire human-Vorta conflict. As alarms blared and weapons fire echoed through the corridors of the horizon, both knew that the next few moments would be crucial. Mark's mind raced as he assessed their dire situation. The automated defenses were closing in, but a daring plan was taking shape. He turned to Janice, his expression a mix of drive and apprehension. "I need to get to the outer hull," he said, his voice low and urgent. "If I can disable those boarding pods, we might have a chance." Janice's golden eyes widened. "That's suicide, Mark. The vacuum, the radiation—" "I know," he cut her off, already moving towards a nearby maintenance locker. "But it's our only shot." As Mark rummaged through the locker, pulling out emergency repair equipment and spare parts, Janice watched him with a growing sense of admiration and fear. She'd never seen a human display such reckless courage. "If you're doing this," she said, her voice firm, "then I'm going to guide you. We'll rig up a comm link." Mark nodded, gratitude evident in his eyes as he began fashioning a makeshift spacesuit. The next few minutes were a blur of activity as they cobbled together the equipment he'd need to survive in the vacuum of space. "Ready?" Janice asked, holding up the jury-rigged communication device. Mark took a deep breath, securing the last seal on his improvised suit. "As I'll ever be." With a final nod to Janice, Mark set off through the ship's service tunnels, navigating the labyrinthine passages with Janice's voice guiding him through the comlink. The sounds of battle echoed through the metal corridors, energy weapons discharging, shouted orders, and the ominous creaking of the ship's hull under stress. Meanwhile, on the bridge, Captain Chen coordinated the defense against the Vorta invaders. The united human crew, setting aside their recent conflicts, fought with a ferocity that surprised even the battle-hardened Vorta shock troops. "Team Alpha, fall back to Junction 17, Chen barked into her comm. "Beta Squad, flank from the portside maintenance shaft." Beside her, Janice provided crucial insights. "The Vorta will likely target life support systems next," she warned. "It's a common tactic to demoralize defenders." Chen nodded, quickly relaying orders to reinforce those critical areas. As the battle raged inside the horizon, the space around the ship erupted with weapons fire. Aboard the HNS Dauntless, Captain Elena Rossi's hands flew over her command console, executing a series of complex maneuvers. The sleek human warship danced through space, using the disabled horizon as cover against the Nemesis's superior firepower. "Helm, bring us around on Vector 227, Rossi commanded. "Weapons, target their starboard shield generator. Fire when ready." The Dauntless's main guns roared to life, lancing out with precise bolts of energy that struck the Vorta ship's weakened shields. The Nemesis shuddered under the impact, its defenses flickering. Back inside the horizon, Mark's heart pounded as he approached the airlock. He'd made it this far, but the real challenge lay ahead. As he rounded the final corner, he froze. A group of Vorta troops, their silver skin gleaming under the emergency lights, were attempting to secure the area. For a moment, Mark considered retreating, but time was running out. Taking a deep breath, he charged forward, wielding a makeshift shock baton cobbled together from spare parts. The first Vorta soldier went down with a surprised grunt as Mark's weapon connected with its midsection. The others reacted quickly, their genetically enhanced reflexes giving them a distinct advantage. Mark found himself in a whirlwind of punches, kicks, and evasive maneuvers. A Vorta fist grazed his ribs, sending a jolt of pain through his body. Mark stumbled but managed to use the momentum to drive his elbow into another attacker's face. The fight was brutal and desperate, with Mark taking several hard hits but refusing to go down. As the last Vorta fell, Mark leaned against the wall, panting heavily. His body ached and he could feel warm blood trickling from a cut above his eye. But there was no time to rest. "Mark? Mark, are you there?" Janice's worried voice crackled through the comm. "I'm here," he rasped, pushing himself upright. "Made it to the airlock, going EVA now." With trembling hands, Mark cycled the airlock. As the outer doors slid open, he was confronted with a view that took his breath away. The vastness of space stretched before him, punctuated by the flashes of weapons fire between the Dauntless and Nemesis. Pushing aside his awe, Mark focused on the task at hand. He carefully made his way across the horizon's hull, the magnetic boots of his makeshift suit keeping him anchored. The nearest Vorta boarding pod loomed ahead, its sleek form latched onto the ship like a metallic parasite. "Okay, Janus," Mark said, kneeling beside the pod. "Talk me through this." As Janus began explaining the override process, Mark's hands moved over the pod's access panel. It was delicate work, made all the more challenging by his bulky gloves and the ever-present risk of being spotted by the Nemesis or hit by debris. Inside the ship, Janus found herself facing a moral crucible. As she aided the human defenders, she recognized several Vorta attackers, former comrades from her father's ship. The conflict that had been simmering inside her reached a boiling point. A group of human security officers crouched behind a barricade, unaware of the Vorta squad flanking them from a side corridor. Janus saw the familiar face of her old friend Toran leading the Vorta team. In that moment, she had to choose: warn the humans or allow her former comrades to gain the upper hand. Time seemed to slow as Janus wrestled with her decision. The loyalty she'd developed towards Mark and the humans warred against the instinctive connection to her own people. With a heavy heart, she made her choice. "Lieutenant Kumar," Janus called out to the human squad leader, "Vorta flanking team coming from the port corridor." Kumar's eyes widened, and he quickly repositioned his team. When Toran's squad rounded the corner, they found themselves facing a prepared defense. Janus caught Toran's eye for a brief moment, seeing the shock and betrayal in his expression, before he was forced to retreat. On the bridge, Captain Chen received an urgent communication from the Dauntless. "Captain," the comm officer reported, "the Dauntless is preparing to send over a team of Marines to assist us. But with the space battle and those boarding pods, they can't dock normally." Chen's mind raced, quickly formulating a plan. "Tell Captain Rossi we'll coordinate a mid-space personnel transfer. Have engineering prep our short-range shuttles." As Chen coordinated with the Dauntless, Mark continued his precarious work on the hull. The override process was proving far more complex than anticipated. Each layer of security he bypassed seemed to reveal another, more intricate obstacle. "Janus," Mark grunted, his fingers starting to cramp inside his gloves. "This isn't working. The pod systems are more advanced than we thought." "Hold on," Janus replied, her voice tense. "I'm accessing some of my father's old files. There might be a back door we can exploit." As Mark waited, he became acutely aware of his vulnerable position. A stray piece of debris from the battle could end him in an instant. The Nemesis loomed in the distance, its weapons creating a deadly light show against the backdrop of space. Inside the Vorta flagship, High Admiral Kroll watched with growing fury as his advantage slipped away. The human ship was proving far more resilient than he'd anticipated, and reports of the unified resistance aboard the Horizon fueled his rage. "Divert all remaining power to weapons," Kroll commanded, his voice cold with commitment. "Prepare for a final barrage. Target both ships." His second-in-command looked alarmed. "Sir, that will leave us virtually defenseless." "Do it," Kroll snapped. "I will not accept failure. We end this now, whatever the cost." As the Nemesis's weapons system surged with power, the situation reached a critical juncture. Mark, precariously balanced on the Horizon's hull, raced against time to disable the boarding pods. Inside, Janus and the human crew fought desperately to repel the Vorta invaders. And in space, the Dauntless prepared for a daring mid-battle personnel transfer, all while facing the threat of the Nemesis's final, devastating attack. The next few moments would determine not just the fate of the Horizon and its crew, but potentially the future of human-Vorta relations. As weapons charged, borders advanced, and heroes fought against impossible odds, the stage was set for a climactic series of events that would push the limits of courage, loyalty, and the power of cooperation in the face of overwhelming adversity. Mark's fingers flew over the access panel of the Vorta boarding pod, his movements precise despite the bulky gloves of his makeshift spacesuit. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he input the final command sequence Janus had relayed to him. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sudden lurch, the pod detached from the Horizon's hull. Mark watched, his breath caught in his throat, as the sleek silver craft drifted away into the void, its occupants now trapped inside. "It worked," he breathed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Confirmed," Janus's voice crackled through the comm. "The pod systems are offline. Well done, Mark." A surge of confidence coursed through him. Without wasting a moment, Mark pushed off from his position, using his magnetic boots to guide himself towards the next pod. His movements were smoother now, more assured, as he applied the knowledge gained from his first successful attempt. Inside the Horizon, Janus stood at a crossroads. She could see Lieutenant Kumar and his team, unaware of the approaching Vorta squad led by her old friend Torin. Time seemed to slow as she weighed her options. Her loyalties pulled in opposing directions. In that crystallizing moment, Janus made her choice. "Lieutenant Kumar," she called out, her voice steady and clear. "Vorta, flanking team, coming from the port corridor." Kumar's eyes widened in surprise, but he wasted no time. "You heard her, people. Get ready." The human security team quickly repositioned, their weapons trained on the port corridor. When Torin's squad rounded the corner, expecting to catch the humans off guard, they instead found themselves facing a wall of prepared defenders. The ensuing firefight was brief but intense. Energy bolts sizzled through the air, leaving scorch marks on walls and filling the corridor with acrid smoke. Janus caught Toran's eye for a fleeting second, seeing the shock and betrayal in his expression, before he was forced to retreat with the remnants of his squad. As the echo of weapons fire faded, Kumar approached Janus. "That was some quick thinking," he said, a newfound respect in his voice. "You saved our lives." Janus nodded, her expression a mix of persistence and lingering sadness. "I've made my choice," she said simply. "I'm with you now." On the bridge, Captain Chen's hands danced over her console as she coordinated with the Dauntless. "Captain Rossi," she said, her voice tense but controlled. "We're prepping our short-range shuttles for the personnel transfer. It's going to be tight." "Understood, Chen." Rossi's voice came through, punctuated by the sounds of battle in the background. "My Marines are ready. Initiating launch sequence now." Chen watched on the tactical display as a swarm of small craft erupted from the Dauntless. The shuttles weaved through the debris field, their pilots performing feats of incredible skill as they dodged energy beams and chunks of floating wreckage. Several shuttles took hits, their signals winking out on the display. Chen gritted her teeth, forcing herself to focus on the ones that were still intact. As the surviving shuttles approached the Horizon's emergency airlocks, she turned to her security chief. "Get those Marines inside and to the front lines ASAP." Aboard the Nemesis, High Admiral Kroll's face was a mask of fury as he watched his carefully laid plans unravel. "Divert all power to weapons," he snarled, his silver skin gleaming under the harsh bridge lights. "Target both ships. We end this now." The Vorta warship seemed to come alive with pent-up energy. Its weapon ports glowed with an ominous light as it unleashed a devastating barrage towards both the Horizon and the Dauntless. Captain Rossi's voice rang out over the Dauntless's bridge. "Evasive maneuvers! All hands brace for impact!" Despite Rossi's best efforts, the Dauntless took several direct hits. The ship shuddered violently, and alarm klaxons blared as systems failed across the board. "Shields are down!" the tactical officer shouted. "Hull breaches on decks 3 through 7. Rossi gripped her command chair, her fingers tightening. "Reroute emergency power to life support and engines. Keep us in the fight." Back on the Horizon's hull, Mark felt the ship vibrate beneath him as the battle intensified. He redoubled his efforts, his hands moving with practiced efficiency as he disabled the final Vorta boarding pod. "That's it," he said, his voice tight with exertion. "Janus, I'm triggering the shutdown sequence now." Inside the ship, the effect was immediate. Vorta troops found their communications cut off, their equipment failing. The human defenders, bolstered by the arrival of the Dauntless Marines, seized the opportunity. "Push forward!" Chen's voice rang out over the ship-wide comm. "Retake engineering and the weapons control room." The tide of battle shifted dramatically. Human and Vorta forces clashed in the corridors of the Horizon, but the advantage now clearly lay with the defenders. Janus moved alongside the human security teams, her insights into Vorta tactics proving invaluable. "They'll try to regroup at Junction 17, she said to Kumar as they advanced. "If we cut them off at the auxiliary control room, we can trap them." Kumar nodded, quickly relaying the information to his squad. Minutes later, they had a group of Vorta soldiers cornered, with no choice but to surrender. In space, the battle between the Dauntless and the Nemesis reached its climax. The Dauntless, its hull scarred and venting atmosphere in multiple sections, seemed on the verge of defeat. But Captain Rossi had one last card to play. "Activate the graviton beam," she ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. A focused beam of invisible force lanced out from the Dauntless, striking the Nemesis amidships. The effect was catastrophic. The Vorta ship's structural integrity failed in seconds, great rents appearing in its hull as internal explosions rocked the massive vessel. Seizing the moment, Mark reactivated the Horizon's primary weapons array. Working in concert with the Dauntless, both ships unleashed a final, punishing assault on the crippled Nemesis. On the Vorta flagship's bridge, Kroll watched in disbelief as his ship died around him. "This isn't possible," he muttered, before finally giving the order he'd never thought he'd have to give. "All hands, abandon ship." As Vorta escape pods streaked away from the doomed Nemesis, the human crews allowed themselves a moment of weary celebration. But the victory was bittersweet. The Horizon's life support systems were failing, and the Dauntless was too damaged to offer immediate assistance. Mark, making his way back inside through the airlock, felt the ship groan ominously beneath his feet. He shared a look with Janus as he removed his helmet. "We're not out of this yet, are we?" he asked. Janus shook her head, her expression grim. "No, I'm afraid our troubles are just beginning." As if to underscore her words, a warning klaxon began to sound throughout the ship. The battle was over, but the fight for survival was about to begin. The warning klaxon continued to blare as Mark and Janus rushed to the bridge. Captain Chen stood at her command station, her face illuminated by the flickering emergency lights. "Status report," Chen barked as they entered. "Life support is failing," the operations officer replied, his voice tight. "We've got maybe 2 hours before CO2 levels become critical." Mark stepped forward. "Captain, I have an idea. It's risky, but it might be our only chance." Chen nodded, gesturing for him to continue. "We can use the Vorta boarding pods to physically link the Horizon and the Dauntless," Mark explained, his words tumbling out quickly. "It would allow us to combine our functioning systems and give us a fighting chance." Janus chimed in, her silver eyes gleaming with realization. "I can help modify the pod's connection mechanisms. With my knowledge of Vorta tech, we can make this work. Chen's brow furrowed as she considered the proposal. After a moment, she tapped her comm badge. Chen de Rossi, we have a potential solution, but it's going to take both of us. Captain Rossi's voice crackled through, strained but determined. I'm all ears, Chen. Our engines are shot, and we're sitting ducks out here. As Chen outlined the plan, Mark and Janus hurried to engineering. The corridor was a maze of sparking conduits and emergency repair crews. They found Chief Engineer Reeves elbow-deep in an open panel, sweat beading on her forehead. Reeves, Mark called out, we need to prep the docking systems. We're going to attempt a link-up with the Dauntless. Reeves looked up, her eyes widening. You're joking, right? In this condition? It's our best shot, Janus replied firmly. Reeves hesitated for a moment, then nodded. All right, let's do this. What do you need? As they worked to modify the docking systems, the ship lurched suddenly. Mark stumbled, catching himself on a nearby console. What was that? He asked, steadying himself. Janus's fingers flew over a nearby terminal. Proximity alert. It's an escape pod from the Nemesis. Mark's eyes narrowed. We can't afford any more complications. Let's get it aboard and secure quickly. Minutes later, they watched as a security team escorted the pod's occupants onto the horizon. Mark's jaw dropped as he recognized the imperious figure at the center of the group. Hi, Admiral Kroll, Janus whispered, her voice a mix of awe and apprehension. Kroll's silver eyes scanned the corridor, landing on Janus with a flash of recognition. Before he could speak, Lieutenant Kumar stepped forward. Admiral, you and your people will be confined to the brig until further notice, Kumar stated firmly. As the Vorta prisoners were led away, Mark noticed one of them lagging behind, her gaze fixed on Janus. The resemblance was unmistakable. Janus, he said quietly, who is that? Janus's voice was barely audible. Lyra, my sister. Before Mark could respond, Chen's voice came over the comm system. All hands, prepare for docking maneuvers. This is going to be tricky, people. The next hour was a blur of activity. Mark coordinated with teams on both ships, using the captured Vorta pods as makeshift connectors between the Horizon and the Dauntless. Janus worked alongside him, her knowledge of Vorta technology proving invaluable as they jury-rigged the systems. As the final connection was established, a cheer went up from both crews. Mark allowed himself a moment of relief before focusing on the next challenge. All right, he announced, wiping sweat from his brow. Now comes the hard part. We need to integrate the Horizon's life support with the Dauntless's systems. The integration process was a nightmare of compatibility issues and power fluctuations. Mark's team worked frantically, rerouting power and reconfiguring systems on the fly. Every success was met with a new setback, and more than once, Mark found himself on the verge of giving up. Mark, Janus called out during a particularly frustrating moment, I think I found a way to bypass the Dauntless's primary power grid. It's risky, but... Do it, Mark interrupted, trusting her judgment implicitly. As Janus implemented her solution, the ship's systems stabilized. The emergency lighting flickered, then steadied, brightening to normal levels. We did it, Mark breathed, allowing himself a small smile. Their victory was short-lived. Captain Chen's voice came over the comm, her tone grave. All senior staff to the bridge immediately. Long-range sensors have detected incoming Vorta ships. When Mark and Janus arrived on the bridge, they found it crowded with officers from both the Horizon and the Dauntless. Captain Rossi stood next to Chen, both women's faces etched with concern. Options? Chen asked, looking around the room. We could try to run, Rossi suggested. But with our current state, we wouldn't get far. Fight? Lieutenant Kumar proposed, though his tone lacked conviction. Mark stepped forward. I have an idea, but it's unconventional. All eyes turned to him as he outlined his plan. Use Kroll as a bargaining chip. Leverage Lyra's inside knowledge. Attempt a diplomatic solution. The reaction was mixed. Some, like Janus, nodded in agreement. Others, particularly among the Dauntless crew, looked skeptical. It's too risky, Rossi argued. We can't trust the Vorta. With all due respect, Captain, Janus interjected, you're already trusting this Vorta, and my sister has valuable information that could turn the tide." Chen raised a hand, silencing the growing debate. "We're running out of time and options. Mark, Janice, you have 1 hour to talk to Lyra and formulate a concrete plan. If it's viable, we'll consider it. If not, we prepare for battle." As Mark and Janice hurried towards the brig, the weight of their task settled heavily on their shoulders. The fate of both crews, and possibly the future of human-Vorta relations, now rested in their hands. They found Lyra in a separate cell from the other Vorta prisoners. She stood as they approached, her silver eyes, so like Janice's, wary but curious. "Sister," Lyra said softly, her gaze fixed on Janice, "I never thought I'd see you again." Janice stepped closer to the force field. "Lyra, we need your help. The lives of everyone on this ship depend on it." Mark watched as the two sisters regarded each other, years of separation and conflicting loyalties hanging between them. He held his breath, acutely aware of the seconds ticking away. Finally, Lyra nodded. "What do you need to know?" "No?" Lyra asked, her eyes searching Janice's face. "We need information," Mark interjected, stepping closer to the cell. "And we need a plan." Over the next hour, Mark and Janice worked with Lyra, piecing together a strategy that could save both ships and potentially change the course of the conflict. As they finalized the details, Captain Chen's voice came over the comm system. "Bridge to Mark and Janice. Report immediately." When they arrived on the bridge, they found a tense scene. Captain Chen and Captain Rossi stood side by side, their faces illuminated by the glow of the tactical display. "Long-range sensors have detected a Vorta fleet on an intercept course," Chen announced, her voice tight. "We're out of time. What do you have?" Mark took a deep breath and outlined their plan. He explained how they could use Kroll as leverage, and how Lyra's inside knowledge could be crucial in crafting a message to the approaching fleet. Rossi frowned. "It's risky. We'd be putting a lot of faith in the word of our enemies." "With all due respect, Captain," Janice countered, "at this point, we don't have many other options." Chen nodded slowly. "Agreed. Let's do it. Mark, work with communications to craft the message. Janice, I want you to brief the senior staff on what we can expect from the Vorta fleet." As Mark made his way to the communication station, he felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He worked quickly, integrating the information from Lyra with what they knew about Vorta politics and culture. The result was a carefully worded message that revealed the extent of corruption within the Vorta High Command and offered a path to peaceful resolution. "Message ready, Captain," Mark reported. Chen gave a curt nod. "Transmit." The bridge fell silent as the message was sent. Tense minutes passed as they waited for a response. Suddenly, the tactical officer called out, "Captain, the Vorta fleet is increasing speed. They're on an attack vector." Mark's heart sank, but Chen remained calm. "Hold steady. Let's see how this plays out." As the Vorta ships drew nearer, something unexpected happened. Several vessels began to break formation, their movements erratic and uncoordinated. "Look," Janice said, pointing to the tactical display. "Those ships, they're the ones commanded by Kroll's rivals. They're hesitating." Mark's mind raced. "Captain, I have an idea. It's crazy, but it might be our only shot." He quickly outlined his plan to use the Horizon's experimental FTL drive in conjunction with the Dauntless's power systems to create a massive energy signature. If successful, it could make their two damaged ships appear to be a much larger human fleet. Rossi looked skeptical. "That's incredibly risky. The power requirements alone could overload our systems." "But if it works," Chen added, "it could buy us the time we need to negotiate." After a moment's consideration, both captains agreed to the plan. Mark and Janice rushed to engineering, gathering a team of the best human engineers from both ships. They worked feverishly, integrating systems that were never meant to work together. "Reroute the power from the auxiliary life support," Mark called out, his hands flying over a console. "We need every bit of energy we can get." Janice worked alongside him, her knowledge of Vorta technology proving invaluable as they calibrated the energy output. "If we modulate the signal like this," she suggested, making a series of rapid adjustments, "it should create a more convincing sensor profile." As they worked, the ship shuddered around them. The Vorta fleet was getting closer, and time was running out. "Mark!" Chen's voice came over the comm. "We need that signature now." "Just a few more seconds," Mark replied, his voice strained. He made a final adjustment and nodded to Janus. "Now!" They activated the system, and for a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then the space around them lit up with false sensor readings. On the Vorta scanners, it would appear as if a massive human armada had suddenly materialized. Back on the bridge, Chen wasted no time. "Open a channel to the Vorta fleet." As the view screen flickered to life, revealing the face of the Vorta commander, Chen began to speak. She outlined terms for a ceasefire, drawing on the combined knowledge from Kroll, Janus, and Lyra to address the core issues of the conflict. The negotiations were tense, with moments where it seemed all hope was lost. But slowly, progress was made. More Vorta ships broke away from the main fleet, unwilling to engage what they believed to be a superior force. Just as it seemed they might achieve a breakthrough, alarms blared throughout the ship. "Captain," the tactical officer shouted, "a group of Vorta ships has broken formation. They're on an attack vector." Chen's eyes narrowed. "Hardliners," she muttered. "They'd rather die than accept peace." As the attacking ships closed in, Mark and his team struggled to maintain the energy signature. Systems began to fail under the strain, and power fluctuations threatened to expose their deception. "We can't keep this up much longer," Mark reported, his voice tight with exertion. It was then that Janus made a fateful decision. "I have an idea," she said, turning to Mark, "but you're not going to like it." She quickly explained her plan to board one of the captured Vorta shuttles with Lyra. They would approach the attacking ships, using their status as Kroll's daughters to sow doubt and potentially halt the assault. Mark's heart clenched at the thought of Janus putting herself in such danger, but he knew it might be their only chance. "Be careful," he said softly, meeting her eyes. As Janus and Lyra departed on their perilous mission, the remaining human forces braced for impact. The hardline Vorta ships launched a barrage of weapons fire, testing the limits of the joined ship's defenses. "Evasive maneuvers!" Rossi shouted as the first volley struck home. The ship shuddered violently, and Mark struggled to keep his footing in engineering. As the battle raged around them, Mark focused on maintaining the faltering energy signature. He watched the sensor readings anxiously, looking for any sign of Janus's shuttle. The fate of everyone aboard the Horizon and Dauntless, the success of the negotiations, and the outcome of Janus and Lyra's mission all hung in the balance. In the midst of the chaos, a new signal appeared on the sensors. Mark's heart leapt as he recognized the signature of the Vorta shuttle. But as he watched, the shuttle was suddenly caught in a crossfire between the attacking Vorta ships and the human vessels. "No," Mark whispered, his eyes fixed on the sensor readings. The shuttle's signal flickered, then stabilized. It was still intact, but for how long? As the battle continued to unfold, Mark realized that the next few moments would determine not just their survival, but potentially the future of human-Vorta relations and the course of the interstellar conflict. With renewed drive, he turned back to his console, working to keep their deception alive for just a little longer. The ship rocked violently as another barrage of Vorta weapons fire struck home. Mark gripped his console, struggling to maintain his balance as the deck lurched beneath him. "Engineering to bridge," he shouted into the comm. "Our shields are failing. We can't take much more of this." Captain Chen's voice crackled back, strained but determined. "Hold it together, Mark. We just need a little more time." Mark's eyes darted across the readouts, his mind racing. The energy signature they'd created to fool the Vorta was faltering, and systems across both ships were failing under the relentless assault. He watched helplessly as entire sections of the Horizon and Dauntless depressurized, emergency force fields flickering into place to prevent further catastrophe. Suddenly, a familiar voice cut through the chaos. "This is Janus to all ships. We've made contact with the lead Vorta vessel." Mark's heart leapt at the sound of her voice. He listened intently as Janus continued, her words carrying the weight of their shared history and the future of human-Vorta relations. "I am Janus, daughter of Kroll," she declared, her voice steady and clear. "And I speak now, not just as a Vorta, but as someone who has seen the potential for peace between our peoples." As Janus spoke, Mark noticed a change in the sensor readings. The attacking Vorta ships were slowing, their formation becoming less cohesive. Lyra's voice joined her sister's, adding depth and insider knowledge to Janus's impassioned plea. Mark seized the moment of confusion among the Vorta fleet. His fingers flew across the console as an idea took shape. Dangerous, possibly suicidal, but their only chance. "Bridge, this is Mark," he called out. "I'm going to try something. Brace for impact." Without waiting for a response, Mark began rerouting all remaining power to the experimental faster-than-light drive. Alarms blared as energy levels spiked beyond safe limits. The ship groaned and shuddered, the joined hulls of the Horizon and Dauntless straining under the immense forces. "Come on, hold together," Mark muttered, his eyes fixed on the power readouts. With a final push, the drive engaged. A blinding flash erupted from the joined ships, bathing the entire battlefield in searing light. The shock wave rippled through space, washing over the Vorta fleet and disrupting their sensors and communications. As the light faded, an eerie silence fell over the comms. Mark blinked away the after images, his ears ringing in the sudden quiet. For a moment, he feared they'd destroy themselves in the process. Then Captain Chen's voice came over the comm, sharp and decisive. "All ships, this is Captain Chen of the Horizon. We call for an immediate cessation of hostilities." Mark listened in awe as Chen outlined the extent of human-Vorta cooperation aboard the Horizon. She spoke of Janus and Lyra, of the corruption within the Vorta High Command, and of the potential for a new era of peace between their species. As Chen spoke, Mark watched the sensor readings. The Vorta ships, their communications restored, began to respond. One by one, they powered down their weapons. The attacking vessels, so bent on destruction moments ago, now hung motionless in space. Hours passed in a flurry of tense negotiations. Mark worked tirelessly with his engineering team, struggling to keep the battered ships functional. As he moved from one crisis to another, he caught snippets of the diplomatic breakthrough unfolding on the bridge. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Captain Chen's voice rang out across both ships. "Attention all crew. As of this moment, we have reached a preliminary peace agreement with the Vorta fleet." A cheer went up in engineering, quickly echoed throughout the ships. Mark sagged against his console, exhaustion and relief washing over him in equal measure. They'd done it. Against the odds, they'd found a way to end the conflict. But their trials were far from finished. The Horizon and Dauntless had taken severe damage during the battle, and it would take weeks of intensive repairs before they could safely make the journey to the nearest human starbase. Mark found himself at the center of a unique joint engineering team, comprised of both human and Vorta specialists. Together, they tackled the monumental task of stabilizing the joined ship's systems and repairing the most critical damage. As they worked, Mark couldn't help but marvel at the sight of humans and Vorta working side by side. The former enemies shared knowledge and expertise, their combined efforts achieving what neither could have done alone. Throughout the long hours and grueling work, Janus was a constant presence at Mark's side. They moved in sync, anticipating each other's needs and building on each other's ideas. In the quiet moments between crises, they found time to talk, to process the whirlwind of events that had brought them to this point. It was during one such moment, as they stood together in a newly repaired section of the Horizon, that Mark realized the depth of his feelings for Janus. He turned to her, taking in her silver eyes and the tenacity etched on her features. "Janus," he said softly, "when all this is over, when we reach the starbase, would you consider—" She smiled, understanding in her eyes. "Yes, Mark, I would be honored to formalize our relationship." The news of their engagement spread quickly through both ships, a bright spot of hope amid the ongoing repairs and delicate diplomatic negotiations. Crew members from both the Horizon and Dauntless offered their congratulations, along with a growing number of Vorta who had come to see the value in this new alliance. Weeks passed, and finally, the joined ships were deemed fit for travel. As they set course for the human starbase, escorted by a contingent of Vorta vessels, Mark and Janus began planning their wedding ceremony. They decided to blend elements of both human and Vorta traditions, a symbolic representation of the new era of cooperation they were helping to usher in. Captain Chen agreed to officiate, her presence a testament to the journey they had all undertaken together. The day of the ceremony arrived, and the Horizon's newly repaired observation deck was transformed. Crew members from both human ships mingled with a delegation from the Vorta fleet, the former enemies now united in celebration. Mark stood at the front of the room, Captain Rossi at his side as his best man. His heart raced as the doors opened, revealing Janice. She walked toward him, radiant in a gown that blended human and Vorta design elements. By her side was Lyra, her silver eyes shining with a mix of emotions. As they exchanged vows, Mark was struck by the gravity of the moment. Their words, a mixture of human and Vorta promises, spoke not just of their love for each other, but of their dedication to the new future they were helping to create. The ceremony concluded with a traditional Vorta binding ritual, followed by the human exchange of rings. As Mark leaned in to kiss his new wife, the observation deck erupted in cheers and applause. The celebration that followed was unlike anything Mark had ever experienced. Human and Vorta customs blended seamlessly, creating something entirely new and beautiful. As he watched his crewmates and their former enemies laughing and dancing together, Mark felt a surge of hope for the future. Later, as the party wound down, Mark and Janice found themselves alone by the observation deck windows. The starbase loomed large before them, a symbol of the safety and new beginnings that awaited. "What do you think happens now?" Janice asked softly, her hand warm in Mark's. He gazed out at the starbase, then back at his wife. "I'm not sure," he admitted. "But whatever comes next, we'll face it together." As the joined ships began their final approach to the starbase, Mark and Janice stood hand in hand, ready to step into the unknown. The journey that had brought them together had been fraught with danger and uncertainty, but it had also shown them the incredible potential for change and growth. The docking procedures began, and Mark could see the welcoming committee assembling in the airlock. He took a deep breath, squeezing Janice's hand. Together they moved forward, ready to greet whatever challenges and opportunities awaited them in this new era of human-Vorta relations.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.